Governance Committee for Auburn Industrial Development Authority. Can I get a roll call, please?
Counselor Cuddy,
Present.
Mr. Lovell. Mr. Andre is excused, and we also have Ms. Weber with us.
Right.
Claire has a meeting here at 5. So she's gonna bring the bill up.
Oh, okay.
One of us has to watch.
My grandsons, they work at Quidditch. It's like jump on my Zooms. Hi, ladies, I have something to say. I'm like, no, you don't. I give them my meeting. They only do it
That's
on
the
the.
perspective of the future.
Yes, I've given them a title, the chief cuteness officers. I'm like, you gotta go.
So do I move to the next?
Yep.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is the review, the self-evaluation of the board. And I believe we've all got the self-evaluation via email. And we have it here as well. So I just like us to discuss some of the, or what our thoughts are based on what was written and possible reasons for the results, and where can we go from here as we present this to the board in general.
Did you have 100% response? No. What was the total response?
We got 5. One
Oh.
person didn't fill out this first section for some reason, I don't know what, and one person didn't do the individual, but we had 5 responses. We have 9 board members.
Got it.
This is actually updated from the one that went out in the packet. We did get one more response after,
Mhm.
so there's an additional response in what I have in front of you and on the screen here.
That brings us to 6 tricks or that.
This brings us to 5.
Got it. Okay.
We got 4 on time.
Got it.
Was that the late one?
What's that?
Was that the late one?
I probably,
Yes. I'm usually the one that forgets to do it.
We're not supposed to know.
We're family. It's like
I
one
just
of.
thought I caught you looking at it. You said one person came.
It's usually me that's like, did you remember to do it?
No, it was not anybody in this room. So, I think, so the individual board member performance, I thought that was just an interesting way to get people thinking about their own role on the board. I didn't think it was something we needed to like analyze.
Right.
But just, I noticed that there was an issue with the scoring column or scoring row. It wasn't picking up the 14th column. So what we ended up with was a max score of 65 and a minimum score of 13 instead of 14 and 70. The average of the 4 people who submitted a score was 58. So, ranging from 49 to 64. So we can see there that nobody thinks they're exactly perfect. And then we have a couple of people who are maybe came to a realization that there's more that they as an individual board member could do. So I just think that this was helpful for individuals more so than for us to like really dive into. This first section was really about strategy and board structure. There was not a clear consensus around this first item. Ada had a set of clear long-range goals and priorities. Other than that, things seem to be, everyone kind of seemed to be in the same general area. But that one was a little all over the place. Is there anything? So, and we had one person say they wanted to discuss that item, and then they wanted to discuss the item around an understanding of the board's role. And the executive director, where the board's role ends and the executive director's begins, so where that ends, but. So thoughts on this? Anything you guys want to discuss here, or thoughts on?
Are you looking at it as a category or are we want us to talk about it? Are you talking us through it?
I'm talking about the whole category.
got it.
We
Okay,
can
yeah.
talk about individual items.
Right.
I just
Okay.
figured I'd give an overview of the category and then point to areas that it seems like we might want to discuss, but.
Well, one of the things for me, Tracy, when I looked at this, I think what Ada has is a mission, maybe a vision, possibly some values and a set of strategic priorities. But I don't think those naturally translate into a clear, long range, 3 to 5 years goals or priorities. I think that in the past, that would be something we would have charged an executive director to do. And I think it's important that if there's any confusion around that, that we clear that up. Right, that what we have is a set of priorities, but we haven't like annualized or done sort of drop down goals recently. For
Yeah,
any
that's
year,
true.
so I want to make sure we make that, just make that clarity for that.
I would concur that definitely we haven't done that in a while, and, you know, that I think because of obviously the range of uh, scoring that we have here, I do think it would be a good idea to revisit our mission statement and strategic priorities. I think that is valuable. To visit. It has been a long time. I know that these were done early on my tenure in on Ada, and obviously a lot has changed. I will say in the past, the CETA did allow the board to come up with their own and without much. It's not that there was no guidance, it was basically that it is the responsibility of us to come up with our own. So
Our mission statement, Terry.
our mission statement, yeah, I think. I think the way we did it in the past was fine, I just think so much has changed.
Right.
Since then.
Right,
And, you know, frankly, the fact that we don't have an executive, it'll be a long time before we have an executive, this is a good opportunity for us to kind of solidify. Like what we want, and that might help us decide how we're going to interface with whatever
Yeah.
CCDC does, or, you know, however we're gonna move forward as an organization, so, I mean. From my perspective, I don't necessarily wanna wait, I think
Right.
we, as a board, can determine our mission.
Yeah.
And goals and priorities.
well, I think that that's an important thing to think about, because even if we decide that we want to look at the priorities we have and just identify what we want as action strategies, at least for the next 12 months, we can use that mission statement as the foundation for doing that. The other thing that if all goes well, there will be an overarching mission for economic development in the county. And then our mission statement, we just want to make sure if that happens, that whatever our mission statement is giving lift to that overarching statement. Does that make sense?
Fits.
So I think,
Yeah, we don't want it to be
No.
contrary.
no, I think we can just define why we believe we exist. And then see how that fits in alignment with whatever the overarching mission of the CCDC becomes.
I
We
agree.
might argue that when we talk about the set of long range goals and priorities, it's not necessarily the mission statement. But also, I'll disagree, I understand why we wouldn't want to wait. But as we have sort of the economic development landscape here sort of developing
Right,
in our area, it kind of makes more sense to me for us to sort of.
Jill.
Well,
Yep.
it's like, well, where are we going to fit in
Right.
as that comes in there? We
Yeah.
might come up with all sorts of decisions right now about what we'd like to see.
Mhm.
And then we might be told that's not the place we're gonna be able to occupy, because it just doesn't fit that overarching vision that you're talking about, but so far we don't seem to be.
I agree with that. I hear what you're saying. That's why I think that question or that opportunity to respond to that is appropriate. But for us to even think about what a long range plan is, how do I want to say, from practice, through the lens of best practice, it would be great for us to have. But I totally agree. That's why I'm saying, why don't we just do whatever we think we can focus on in 12-month chunks for now,
Okay.
right? That doesn't preclude us from looking at the mission and still leveraging it on our behalf, but I don't think regulatory, the work of the IDA is going to change what we can or cannot do. However, I do agree, looking at what this larger thing's gonna be, we just wanna make sure that we are making good decisions and plugging in the ways that we can.
I will, just as an update. on Terry earlier, CCDC did meet last week, and one thing that I have volunteered to do is help to. Because going into an executive director search,
Mhm.
CCDC's current mission is very generic.
Right,
It's geared towards having a loan program.
Right.
And being like a funding partner. So one thing that I am going to help to do over the next few weeks is kind of have some conversations with the ADA board, CCIDA board, Jenny, Steve, and start to kind of. Not necessarily, I would say draft a mission, not necessarily set a mission, but like create some sort of statement that shows what we're aiming for from an economic development director. To implement for our community moving forward. So I don't expect it will be the mission statement of CCDC, but at least capturing some of those key priorities and some of those key needs moving forward, so that when they're going out looking for a director, they have something to work from other than some weird generic statement that doesn't say anything.
I'll send you a resource that I use when I'm working with boards of directors that are finding the way that can help you frame that conversation. So, do not count on my 68-year-old brain to remember to do that. You know what you have to do.
I do, I know exactly what. I need.
There you go.
Okay, so it sounds like there's some desire to go to the board with a recommendation that in the next couple of months, we'll start having a conversation about a 12-month strategy. While we're trying to see how we fit into the overall, and I would say that the conversation has not been about excluding ADA by any stretch, like that's still the goal here. And I don't see there being anything that wouldn't align with what ADA's priorities have been in the past. That is still the goal, though, of the CCDC is to work towards that one-stop model. And I think there's going to have to be conversations in that transition about the role of each organization and how each one fits into your plan. So
And truth be told, the board might say, you know what, over the next 12 months, we just want to hold the line and keep doing what we're doing. I'm interested in engaging in that exercise from a perspective of clarity. Does that make sense? Like, we just shouldn't assume. I think I'm perfectly fine if the board says, you know what, because we're kind of in quicksand, what we decide to do is just function the way we are functioning. We could have a couple of aspirational things, I think, in the marketing space, right? But I just think we should be clear that this is where we're going to put our focus over the next year. And that includes this conversation we're having about making sure that we are properly engaged in processes as feasible, reasonable, and appropriate. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Trish, I just had another question about
Yes.
the item, the role and responsibilities of board members and clear. No, that's not the one. It was the one about the makeup of the board. I was just looking if there was some board members have the appropriate talent experience. I know we get appointed by industry, but I also think as we evolve, and again, we'll wait for this, that we might want somebody from industry, but also someone who knows how to do something we want them to do. Like Katie McIntyre is an example of that, right? She's appointed because of kind of where she works, but she's also bringing a very specific expertise to the board that we need. So I just think that the fact that one person out of the three was neutral or unsure about that. I'm just saying, I think that's a point as we're watching what's happening, that we could do a deeper dive into. If we want you from this industry and just kind of have an opportunity when we're recruiting people to, or working with the mayor to make, making recommendations, that we also know what like a skills inventory, not a formal.
Yeah, and then we also do have those 2 at-large seats.
Mhm.
Actually, right now, I think we have 3 because someone's counting as 2, right? So that's a good conversation for those seats as well, because you can get real creative. Anything else on this section? The next section is just about meetings and information. people were mostly in the agree, strongly agree category for this whole section. We had one person saying neutral, unsure around board members coming to meetings well prepared and focused on the work. One disagree on there is enough time at board meetings for presentation and discussion of topics. And I can recall a couple of meetings, even recently, where we had an hour and a half and we were still like not.
Yeah.
done. So,
Yeah,
but those are really where we're having more strategic conversations. So I think
Mhm.
maybe there's something to be said there about maybe breaking some of those topics up into smaller chunks.
mhm.
Like, I think we intended to do housing all at once, but that was silly to
Yeah.
think we could do that.
Do we necessarily time limit ourselves? I mean, we usually say, here's when the meeting is gonna get open, but we don't necessarily say it's gotta be over at that time. I mean,
No,
I never feel like we're rushed
Yeah.
myself.
yeah, I think it's what's on the agenda, but no, the board has full control over the time.
And maybe the other thing we can explore, we could take the board's temperature on this, is that it could be worth having like a quarterly, even if it's virtual, Tracy, long, just a time that's strategic, just focused on something that's trending as well. So, you know, I see that as part of me working with Tracy and how we design the agendas, and we allot time. But I think that if we're discovering that there needs to be even more, and that if we just scheduled an hour or something like education or discussion opportunity for the board, we'll be able to gauge, I think, but I feel like there's a way we can handle this and make sure that we're getting the time that we need. Because you can tell us what we need to pay attention, but like I see what's going on our way. So. Do you feel like the placement of the board education topic is in the right place? I mean, we're flowing through our agenda in a pretty traditional way, but I just sent a client, some new thinking about board meeting agendas, and they have their strategic business discussion earlier in the meeting.
This came up at the IDA Academy as well, like flip your meeting agenda.
Yeah.
Start with the strategic stuff and end with the minutes,
Yeah.
because you don't have to think about the minutes.
Yeah,
It's just a matter of making sure that you do it in such a way that you can get to everything that needs to get done. Because if you don't do minutes, big whoop, do them
you
next
do it the
month.
next
You
month.
don't even have to do that. You don't
Alright.
have to approve
That
minutes.
actually,
Can we use consent agendas as
sense.
IDs or just everything? Yeah.
Yep. So IDAs do not have to vote on their minutes.
Okay.
It's not required. So we do it, like all the IDAs do it as a matter of process. They don't need to do it, and if you skip it or you do it next month, nothing happens because it's not required.
Right.
So you could do it as consent agenda, you could not do it at all, you could do it, I think as a practice, it's helpful because it forces people to look at them.
Right.
yeah,
But,
Plus, I think that I hate to say it this way, but in terms of setting your, when you sit down and you go through your roll call, your minutes, and or whatever, sort of puts people into the mindset of this is a thing, and it's not just.
Yeah.
Well, I think that approving minutes takes about 15 seconds unless there's a problem.
No, I agree. I think it's a way to get people settled in and focused. The other thing we need to know is Karen Walter will know. So, since she's the resident in-depth person, I think, Tracy, if we can be fluid about that.
Yeah.
That there might be a month where, and we'll just be communicating that, right? For the purposes of this meeting, we want to free this this time
Yeah.
earlier in the meeting. But that now that we know that we can be this agile, like say, I'll work with you and you can say to me when I think we need to realign the agenda, but I also agree, we're all coming from busy places, that those first few minutes give us a chance to get our minds.
I see it potentially because of this, we get through the consent agenda items in the
Yeah.
first 3 minutes. You know, even just in the meetings where we have a busier agenda,
Yeah.
maybe we have a few topics that we need to cover.
Right.
That might be a time to reorder, start with, so like
Yeah.
this upcoming meeting, we've got Omir. We have the board agenda, we've got a report out from the governance committee, we have to talk about the budget. You know, there's a lot of things to get to, and maybe not this meeting, but this is the kind of meeting where maybe moving some of those things to the back end and getting through the thinkers, like get Tom in and out,
Right.
get through this initial resolution, talk about the budget, and then put the rest of the reports more towards the end.
Well, certainly if you have a visitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to move some of that stuff
Yeah.
into.
Yeah. So the point with the IDA, what the IDA Academy, the point they made was like, all your board members are freshest when you're approving your minutes. Like, that's where their brain power is going. I'm like, I don't know how much brain power people are putting into approving minutes.
I don't think about it that much to them. It's about two, it just seems like a part of it, this year should be, they gotta do.
Yes. Maybe it's more critical with things like the treasurer's report, we're talking about financials.
Yeah.
There's not a decision to be made,
Right.
we're just informing.
Right.
But that can be a really draining conversation, because it can go on and there can be questions. So maybe it's more about those types of items, and like the bills, where it's like, okay, we're gonna pay our bills, like. I should
Yeah,
do
not
that,
this much.
you know?
The life of an entrepreneur. We need to be the kind of business we want out of business.
Yeah, it's just something to think about. Maybe
Yeah.
next time we have our
Yeah.
agenda setting meeting, we can
Right.
think about what the next agenda looks like, and if it would be appropriate, or if we're still good.
Yeah.
going with-
And I really lean on Tracy to kind of help me prioritize what we talk about, like we have a parking lot full of board education things, but I'm asking her to pull off of that what's most timely and relevant for us. So Tracy, let's look at the content of the next meeting, because it sounds like there's a lot of stuff, and then we can explore reorganizing how we communicate. And just remind me, because I'm not here.
I'll take a stab at it and
Yeah,
I'll send it.
That
to
would be
you.
great. And do we use the consent agenda at Ada?
I mean, it's not really, but it's pretty much, yeah,
Okay,
it's about as close as it gets.
okay.
Without being a consent agenda item or section. Okay. Anything else on this meeting's information section? Same, so there's a little more variation here in the dynamics and the communication. A lot of like onesies, twosies. The most disagreement was around, or the broadest range was around this last item about Ada's accomplishments and challenges are being communicated to members and stakeholders. And then also, you know, some question about, I mean, generally agree, but some questions around whether consensus is really consensus, and whether everybody participates in making decisions. But there's one person that was unsure about receiving appropriate, responsive, and timely follow-up from the staff. Something about two-way communication between the board and director, so. There are also some comments in here about how there's been a transition, so it's kind of hard to answer this
Right.
question.
Yeah.
We don't know.
It was like that-
We were doing like none of this.
That was the overarching
Right.
kind of,
Yeah.
like,
But
you know.
are we talking about before or now?
Very, very. Yeah, that's the kind of. The context that a lot of these were, and I tried to be as fair as I could. But yeah,
I think you can. I think that things have certainly changed in the last 6 to 8 months, or however long Tracy's been back for, but I don't think you could honestly say that in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of really great communication.
no, it's very
It's been the
true.
root.
Oh, it's very true.
The fact was, we would not have had the troubles.
Right.
No, yeah, it's very, very true. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think also one of the things that concerned me as we talk about the rise of the CCDC is that I don't personally feel that we are being communicated
Zero.
about any of
Yeah.
that stuff. That's frustrating.
Yes, so that's also part of the letter, and I
Right.
did mention it at the board meeting, and um, so it's on the table as a discussion point of like
Yeah.
how we improve that communication, but
I think a big point of frustration is that we don't get to pick our executive director if we, like, before as we see that. We don't really get a lot, any say in the staff, and anything, are we gonna pay that money or not? And so in this case, when we're talking about the CCDC, it looks like that's all being set up the same way, and already if they're engaged somebody and they're gonna go to the executive director, we don't have a seat at that table already.
you will. Yeah,
I haven't
so,
been here if that has been decided, 'cause
so
I haven't
CCDC
been-
met last week. Steve is gonna reach out to Gwen about this, about Ada having a seat on search
Oh,
committee.
good.
No.
That's one of
Might
our
that,
But if it's.
nicely put deal breakers.
but might
But
that,
since Thursday,
so
we met on Thursday.
might Steve reach out prior to our meeting Wednesday?
I hope so.
Okay,
Yeah.
that would be good. Obviously, we can't make somebody.
It'll take the edge
I don't think he doesn't have enough funds.
I know. Like, where are y'all gonna live for the next 2 years?
No, we just had a meeting and I mentioned that we're meeting on Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
I do have a question about the last item, and that is, the board ensures that Ada's, how was that done previously?
Recruitment of,
No, the board
No,
ensures
the-
that
the
Ada's
dynamics
accomplishments
and
are
commission.
communicated to members and stakeholders.
I mean,
What did that look
it didn't,
like?
there wasn't a clear structure for
Right.
that.
Mhm.
You know, we would talk about it in like our monthly, we would talk about like projects that were happening in our monthly, citizen contributed article.
Mhm.
You know, we would talk about projects to like the legislature, like the planning board, but there wasn't like a, especially around accomplishments, it was just like, we would put it in the annual report, we would put
Right.
it in the paper, we would talk to groups about it, but it feels like there wasn't a clear and,
Yeah,
We don't have a
Concentrated way.
mailing list or.
I mean, we had it, so CETA, who did CETA have a newsletter? I don't even know if CETA had a newsletter.
I think at one point perhaps, I guess the closest thing to us trying to address this was when we did create our website. I mean, we did try.
Right.
I would say that, some of those stories, success stories were included things that Ada had no involvement in.
Right.
So there was kind of these things that were the intent was there, but the execution from my perspective was like took say a contingent or something next to Ada, maybe something that the CCIDA promoted, and that was part of some of the promotion. So, you know, I think we tried, and then, you know, obviously some of the staff in the you know, interpreted our wishes to, you know, to promote some of the people that got pilots or tax abatements, they weren't contacted, but other people were. To be the, and again, they were all positive stories. It wasn't like, oh, you know, it wasn't like it was, but I think what this is trying to communicate from what I'm trying to interpret is that, you know, and I know the mayor said this, it's like, Ada's done a lot, and sometimes we don't get the credit
Mhm.
because we're not saying like, oh, this project was funded by Ada, this project was funded by Ada. And so there were attempts, but the follow through just wasn't there. And again, and I think part of it is that, you know, there was a lot of turnover. I mean, it all goes back to some of
Who's
the,
gonna do it?
you know,
One of
Yeah,
the,
staff.
Yeah.
I wanna talk about this with us because one of the things as I was onboarding into this position, I met with the mayor, the city manager, city clerk, and Jenny was there. And one of the things that I would like to do at some point, if you all think this is feasible, is for us to literally invite people who have projects or have had a project to come and literally have an interaction with us where we just kind of refresh and remind, give them an opportunity to showcase the outcomes of getting the incentives that they had, and then literally say to them, while we're evolving, what are some recommendations you would have for us in order to better serve? And I think the more we can get up close and personal with folks, the better for us, especially because the environment is dynamic. So, you know, it's important to me that they know that we're focused, that we're doing the job that we can do at this point, that we're thankful that they're choosing to do business in the city and really hear from them how getting that support has helped them succeed, because I think that's the spot where I think our branding and positioning person could be, right? And maybe one of the things we do over time is actually ask them to say that this project was funded by Ada on their own stuff. You know how if you get a grant from a foundation, they're part of their deal is that you need to say that this project was funded by the Central New York Community Foundation. But I that really makes me think about relationship now building with our actual folks. And at the time, the mayor said he thought it was a great idea, but because there was so much going on that he wanted us to wait. So I'm all about,
Yeah.
the city letting us know what the right timing would be. But when I think about that, we ensure that our accomplishments and challenges are communicated to members and stakeholders, I see that as really building relationships with them, positioning ourselves with them, and also giving them a chance to come and showcase for us what they've done, how our support has helped them. So we'll raise that when the time is right, but I just kind of want,
I agree.
just because I'm saying it, I just talk like I mean it. You have to say it stuff for real. Dan, how does that sit with you when you hear me say it?
I think it's especially good. I think if you could invite just one of them in. For one,
Yeah.
Come in.
Yeah.
Right.
Just for the feedback.
Yeah.
But also thinking about the marketing committee.
Yeah.
And what's coming up.
Yeah.
Those folks would also just be good for our marketing.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Even if it's nothing more than getting a quote from them, a picture of them inside their
Mhm,
business.
mhm. I like either approach. I think it can be both, actually.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
In both ways,
exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
bring them in and have them talk to us firstly about
Mhm,
what the experience was like.
Yeah.
Like, continue to have a relationship with them so that they can talk to other people in the community about it.
Right.
Word of mouth is the best thing,
mhm.
but also what can we have done better and what can we do better to support them as they continue along?
Mhm.
We might be able to learn a lot from this.
Yeah, I love that,
Get
inviting,
them for us. An ad.
right? I love that. And I think the other thing too is like, almost it's like a focus group, but with chips, dip and cheese.
Yeah.
Right, it's more but I love finding ways to issue an invitation and to, we could pre-send the questions, Tracy, and have them come ready to just kind of talk with us about saying that, it's our opportunity to celebrate what they're doing in the community and to hear from them. What are, we're looking for advice. What advice would you have for the Ada board? Is a great way to ask the question. I called, is it Ryan? That we did something for him. I just called and left him a message and said, I just want to thank you. I'm glad we were able to help you. Don't hesitate to be in touch. And he called me back and he says, thank you so much, Gwen, for giving me a call. They had his assistant because he's got life like ours, right? But I just thought, just those little touches can make a difference to some. So I'm glad the marketing committee will get together and this. Follow-up receives appropriate response. There is good two-way communication.
Last section is oversight. And again, it's a little all over the place. A lot in the unsure, maybe rolling category. A good amount in the agree. But definitely some questions down here on the being surprised or blindsided, and I think that speaks to what we're talking about before. I'm guessing that speaks to what we were talking about before.
Right.
Like not feeling in the loop
Right.
and really part of the organization and the strategy. Anything else you want to talk to?
I mean, it wasn't that long ago when we found out we didn't have a staff.
Welcome.
I think that's kind of where my.
Right, all right.
Yeah, and that, and again, you'll see some of the additional comments. I
Right.
mean, everyone was coming at this from different angles and like, you know, some people were like, I'm only basing this on since MRB. is-"
Exactly.
Some people like, their range of time was predates it. So I mean, that's why I think. I mean, we can learn from this evaluation, but it's such, you know, I think you went back a little further. I'm like, I can't think, I've already done my part with
We're
talking to
traumatized.
Camoin. I gave them everything and I'm like, I'm not gonna take that point and I'm gonna move forward.
Yeah.
So that's why I think there is such a range, but still, it's, you know. And again, I just wanna say this, it's like, there's too much up in the air now.
Yeah.
And there's been too much up in the air for too long.
Right,
And that's why I am really hoping that Wednesday. Phone calls have been made so that
I can ask
when
somebody,
you can,
Right.
you know, present with us
Right.
what. CCDC is.
yeah, if you can impress upon Steve, or I can do it. Just tell the brother to talk to me sooner than later, okay? Cause I think that will do a lot to buy trust, because the issue he's confronted with is low trust. And so I think that would be really helpful, then I'll send Aileen the letter, I can have a deeper level of conversation with her.
You know,
So,
I would say just
say that again? Okay, I can call him directly. Good.
Calling's my best.
Yes, I will do, good, I will call him. And then we'll send the letter like immediately after the meeting to Aileen, and then I'll set up a time to talk to her. The thing that I love about this kind of board evaluation, though, is it does say to the board, these are the things you need to be attending to. And I think that
Yeah.
these questions, even for people who didn't answer, sort of what we're asking people to focus on is really what we are obligated to focus on. And so, and also I actually chaired a board where after every meeting, there were like little cards and people could send me letters, you know? And they had kind of some of these questions like, did you get enough information? And I even would get feedback about my style, you know, when you feel like you rushed too much or you needed to create more room. So I just really love that we can share these outputs, but also say to the board, even if you didn't respond, it's critical that we all understand that this is what we're responsible for doing. And then our meetings are being shaped to help us get to places where more often than not, we would struggle. And I agree, we're all impacted by the ebb and flow of what's happening. I feel like Fred Flintstone, like my feet are like yabba dabba doing to kind of stabilize things, because I do think we're stabilizing ourselves in the midst of all of this, so.
It says a lot that even in the state of flux that we're currently in, with the unknown, that we're in better shape than we've been in at any time in the last 2 years. And I think that's true.
It's true. It's true.
Perfect.
Well, I
Thank you,
have a
Amber.
belief that everything rises and falls on leadership, and I think we have the right person, we have somebody who knows the community. I'm very much so committed to doing my board, but I think we have the right kind of board right now too. But yeah, I love this. Tracy, was there anything else in this section that, or these comments below?
Well, I think there's a lot of folks saying like this is an interesting and challenging time.
Yeah.
Because of the flux that the organization finds itself in. And that we've really got to kind of keep an eye on how things, right, this might be between me reading between the lines, but really keeping an eye on how ADA is being integrated
Right.
and making sure there's open communication about what ADA's role is.
Yeah.
And that ADA is okay with that and okay with the intentions moving forward and not just going along with the flow, you know, like ADA being intentional about their.
Yeah,
moving
and that's
forward.
one of the things that I'm wanting to lead us to do in this period of ambiguity, like get really clear how we feel about, you know, as clear as we can. How do we really feel about housing so that when we pull up to the table, we kind of have we have our agenda of things that are important to us and how we see ourselves engaging. So sort of the board education topics that I'm asking Tracy to share with us now are in alignment with that. And then eventually I'd like us to have our own sort of internal position about things, even including what we hope the entity will function like, what we're looking for as the attributes of this new executive director that kind of thing. So that we're not confused about who we are when we show up as this starts to unfold. And I'm gonna say, and Aileen, you really wanna do things to keep us in the room. You really wanna keep us in the room, so.
Yeah, and I think thinking about if how Ada is operating changes as part of the
Right.
ecosystem, are you
Yeah.
open to having that conversation?
Yes.
Or is there a line where you say like, we have to be able to do it at least X, Y, Z, or have at
Right.
least X.
Right,
And like the board membership, I think is one of those things.
right, that's a deal.
Um,
Not
and-
being effectively communicated with, a deal.
Yeah, so I think that there's a question about how the IDAs, I think there is an overall question about how the IDAs will fit in and how active they will be versus CCDC and the
Mhm.
staffing of CCDC and how that all comes together.
Mhm.
So I think it's just something that things could change and maybe
Yeah.
not for the worse.
Right. I also think that that's an attribute, that has to be an attribute of this new executive director. Because that person has to think about how to create an environment that brings everybody into the table. And allows us all to be seen as assets and not a liability, but whatever that bigger thing is that we're all working against. That person has to understand how to create that. It's not like just creating a new thing and putting a bunch of organizations inside of it. In my mind, it's about creating this new thing and bringing everybody in the table, pushing into the middle of the table what, can. But figuring out how this system is going to add the greatest value. The system's not gonna work if our IDA isn't functioning, right? So I think it's those kinds of things, and that's a leadership attribute that we wanna look for in somebody.
Yeah.
Right, because in my mind, I think we're being remiss if we just think we're gonna create a new title and put everything that's in a silo right now inside of that. Because I think we have to figure out how do we do this.
Yeah.
Everything we do should be giving lift to this overarching goal, and if we can't literally do it, we should have a position about it. We should be advocating for something we should be. That's a leadership action. It's a skill set that we need to have somebody have.
Yeah, I was thinking about that today,
Yeah.
how one of the challenges was that things were never truly integrated.
Right.
Every piece was still its own piece.
Yeah.
Doing its own thing.
Right.
And, thinking forward to CCDC transitioning into this one-stop model, that integration piece needs to happen. Because we're gonna run into the same things we're gonna do before, the communication issues and and how does that happen in an effective way?
That's why the right person has to be picked to be the leader, because it truly is a skill set.
Yeah.
I'll send you, just remind me to send you some stuff, because I've been using a leadership competency model that I think would really be able to inform the search when it gets down to what we're really looking for. Any other ideas, colleagues?
Covered.
Well, I'm looking at being able to provide insight and recommendations.
So are there specific priorities we want to report out to the board on Wednesday? Just thinking forward to Wednesday, we're gonna want to provide some kind of an overview or list of priorities.
I think some of the stuff on this back page, Tracy, like suggested improvements for the ADA board and operations have less temporary. Identify our 2025 goals, being more strategic about annual work plans. I think with the recent improvements to the board, I think some of that stuff might be some of the sort of the major themes that fell out.
Well, I mean, obviously you have this in the minutes,
Right.
but like having what was mentioned by Gwen and Dan about having. People that have received pilots, come in. And meet, or like a pilot. Once a month, at our meetings, have one of our.
Yeah.
Recipients come in and
I
give an
love that.
update.
It's about relationship building.
I think the big takeaway for me is looking at the answers is that we've had a really volatile year. I think it looks like, to me, most people think we're on the right track, even though it continues to be kind of volatile.
Yes.
So we're building the
yeah,
track and
right.
driving on it at the same.
Yeah, it looks like that's kind of what everybody is feeling, at least that's what I feel.
Right.
That seems to be really reflected in what we're seeing in the answers here. I think we've it's a little frustrating to get responses from when they have from the board, I think. That unfortunately doesn't give you, the whole picture, but
Can we offer the opportunity for people to respond if they didn't?
I think at this point, we're gonna be handing out another one in December anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna do the annual one, which is kind of more boring than this.
I'll give
but
them the
it's
look. I'll wear extra
shorter.
long eyelashes.
so like, I think communicating how frustrating it is to try to make or to evaluate ourselves as a board when we only have half of the board participate is particularly difficult, and certainly we're gonna rely on everybody.
Sure, it's critical.
To be involved next time.
Let her to craft your talking points, committee chair, because you'll be given the report.
I'll email you these notes.
Thank you.
Just tell me what to say.
Thank you.
But I love this one. I know that we have to do the other one too, but I think this really, for me, what it does is it sends the signal to all of us.
Yeah.
I'm reflecting back before before Elaine had to come in with that audit. She said, "Well, I don't know if I should say this." I said, "Say what?" It's actually it's not okay that you didn't know. And I said, "Oh, no, you need to say that." You're not making nice. So you need to say that. So I just think you say, this is what we need to be doing.
Yeah, so we'll bring, I think, in next year, what we can do is bring this one back.
Right.
Or plan to bring this one back in June,
Mhm.
so it's more of a halfway as
Right.
opposed to a 3/4
Right.
way.
Right.
So, I'll wait till, you're ready for the next, are we ready for
I'm ready.
the bylaws and so, the next section is our, charter bylaws, code of ethics. So, I think that as of right now, well, it says that 2014 was the last time that many of these were revisited. I tend to think that we did revisit some of these more recently.
I remember that too.
Yeah, like May 15th, we did talk about, so one was I think the whistleblower was 2014, but I know that recently.
Yeah,
We
we
talked,
updated the bylaws.
yes, and a lot of that had to do with the treasurer and being able to. Issue checks along with. Our either a Gwen or our treasurer.
Yeah.
Because of what. Happened with the how should I say, the lack of clarity as to what the responsibility of CETA, the leadership at CETA didn't have that. Process mastered at that point in time, so we were left with not being able to. Pay our taxing jurisdictions and so we made those adjustments, so we have. And some of those procedures we've updated, but I wanted to. Open it up to you guys to see if there was anything else that we felt needed to be updated.
Yeah, I think that, so just from a compliance standpoint, and so these do get reviewed every year. You're right, some of them haven't been updated since, 2014 because. They don't need to be. I think it's probably worth taking a look at the charter. In more depth, either. Now or over the course, like for our next meeting, having another conversation about it. Just to make sure that, especially where we're talking about the powers of the governance committee and the responsibilities. Just to make sure, I think governance committee is probably in good shape, but some like audit committee probably needs maybe some adjusting. So just making sure that we've read this and are still in agreement with everything that's actually in here and how we've been implementing. I think is worthwhile, so.
So I guess one of the things that I noticed is that the finance committee and the audit committee Do you, I'm gonna ask your opinion, do you see that? That. It's hard to fill all the committees and is there, or do you think, do we have those committees filled yet?
We do.
Okay.
Yep, we've got those filled. The main thing is like the audit committee, like the audit committee charter still had, remember, you might remember this, going through this whole idea of the internal audit. And whether that should be done annually or when needed or.
Definitely
whatever.
annually, definitely annually.
We had a problem in a situation.
So like some of those things that are kind of in the, I just want to make sure that we're reviewing what's came from a template. And that we're actually following.
You
Those,
know-
or updating them to reflect what we're really doing.
Like seeing, and the other thing, Tracy, I think, remember early on when I was just trying to like set the baseline, I kind of walked the board through all of this.
Oh, okay.
But I think, but very high level, it's just sort of like, go back and read these things, but as needed and appropriate, these are important, this is a board education thing to me. So just help me understand where we are procedurally, like, does the governance committee have to get the board to reapprove, do anything with these by a certain deadline?
So.
It is at this meeting?
So the policies themselves, all of the board policies,
Right.
we review and either amend or re-adopt. at
Right.
the Annual meeting in January.
Okay, good.
So in these months leading up to January, we always have each of the committees meet to review policies.
Got it.
In the past, sometimes those meetings have been very short and perhaps not as
In depth.
in depth as they may have, should have been.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these policies are, they're templates from the
Right.
state, they say
Right.
exactly what they need to say. But the charters and the bylaws in particular are an area that I think it's important to look a little more closely at, like, oh, whistleblower policies.
Yes. Right.
Whatever. But I think it's worth taking a look at these charters and the bylaws a little more carefully.
I like that idea.
So that's where we are in the process, is the governance committee is reviewing your policies today. Finance will review policies in October. And, the audit committee will have meet probably in November as we're getting into the audit process. And either November or December as we're starting the audit process for 2024. And we'll have them review their policies then, and the annual meeting in January will reapprove everything, or make amendments as needed. And that would, any amendments would be recommended.
And you're just getting our take on how we feel about.
Yeah, I'm just like calling your attention to the
Right.
charter in particular,
Okay.
because I don't know that it's been like fully read. Since 2014.
Do you have an assignment for us?
Yeah, I
That's
think,
what- Do you have an
maybe-
assignment for us, Chair?
well, maybe what we should do before Wednesday is. Is go through the charter and against the three of us. Not today. Before
We
Wednesday.
started, somebody did.
I think it's manageable. I think as long as it's just three of us.
Right.
And if anything jumps out as being like, this is something that we may need to reconsider, given the last few years.
Right.
That could tighten it up, or if we read it and we're like, this makes sense. I would say, I think that that's fair enough homework. And I'll do it since I'm the chair of the committee. But let me know if there's any recommendations.
Got it. You just
at
want us to-
Wednesday's meeting, yeah, that way, and then I will invite the board and broader board to review it themselves if they find anything, but we'll focus on the chart, because everything else, I mean, between some of the bylaws and some of the other things that we have changed in recent years. There has been some attention, based on some things, some voting irregularities that I made. There have been some changes, but you're right, the charter, we haven't touched since 2014, so.
I should at the very least put it on our current letterhead. Or
Yeah.
take it off of letterhead altogether.
Yeah, that's fine. I like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Put it on the new letter.
Right.
But yeah, well, before you do that, we'll.
Good stuff. That's not our branding.
We'll I'll give it a good run through and then. if
I
you
can look at it.
as well.
So you want us to look specifically at our.
Your chart.
Yes, the governance charter.
The other thing, Trace, is because you were like just at the IDEA Academy, you're kind of in that space, if you're hearing things. that we should consider. If you could do that deep dive from sort of like our technical assistance perspective, that would be great. And then, yeah, I could just take a look at that. This was in attached to our,
Yep.
Got
it's a
Yep.
heading method.
I'll take a look at
You know, it might be that it's fine.
it.
I just
We
would
need
like
to-
to
Yeah.
affirmatively say
Say,
that.
we did it.
We'll have 6 eyes looking at
That's
it
right.
over the next 2 days.
Instead of us giving it the head nod, that's what I feel like when I was doing
Yeah.
before.
Well, yeah, cool. I mean, the rest of these, you know, I think the code of ethics was updated more recently. These ones down here are all pretty.
Yeah, there's
simple
there's
and
no-
straightforward. So
yeah.
these top 3 are really like the hardest and biggest ones. And I think this is just the one that maybe hasn't gotten as much attention the last couple of
Okay,
years.
that's fair. We can do, I can do that. We can do that.
Great.
Any-
Okay, we are not going to 6 o'clock.
No, we're not. Well, you have it starting at 5. You have it starting at 5.
Oh, I pulled it over.
That's fine.
Ready.
Um,
Oops.
so anything else to talk about, discuss?
I don't think I have any other updates
I know
at
that
this point. So,
Gwen, the chair's gonna reach out. Okay, great.
I'll be calling Mr.
And
Say I have
then,
a meeting on Wednesday. I'd love to be able to report